when you think about the Pentagon report, June 25th of last year, 143 different instances, of all the phenomenon, right? The unidentified aerial phenomenon. They acknowledged, well, you know about it. Talk to us about that, the influence or importance of that report. How does it provide any sort of insight into really like some of the topics you're going to discuss at the conference?
Well, I talked to Richard Dolan about this too, and Richard is, I think, the premier ufologist, and he's a good friend of mine. And I believe that the Pentagon, and he might have reason I name him is because he has a different opinion. So this is my opinion. This is my perspective here. But when I look at what the Pentagon has been doing in terms of what it's been releasing regarding the UFO phenomenon, they're not using the word alien, they're using the word UFO, UAP, more specifically, unidentified aerial phenomenon. I believe that what we're seeing is a posture of a threat from the Pentagon, that the Pentagon is framing UFOs, UAPs in the context of a national security threat. And the reason why, in my estimation, their hand is being forced for some of these disclosures, the Nimitz incident with the Tic Tac shaped, which was probably a saucer, wasn't a Tic Tac, and some of these other incidences that they've made public, is because the phenomenon is becoming a little more hostile. And what I mean is, there are reports, and these are official reports, that some of these UAPs, which are just UFOs, some of these UFOs, are now being more frequently seen, observed, flying too close for comfort to our battleships, flying too close for comfort to our fighter jets and our various warplanes, and are beginning to hover over our secret underground installations. Now, UFOs for years, saucers, let's be specific, saucers have hovered over our nuclear silos in various occasions in the past, and have even deactivated them. There's a famous case here in Montana some decades ago where that happened. But I believe that what we're seeing is an increase in the frequency of these kind of hostile posturings from these entities. And the government, the Pentagon, knows that that's the case. And there's another problem, and this is an increasing problem. Every year, every decade, our technology gets better and better, our handheld cameras. So you can't gaslight people anymore. We got our own cameras. We see a flying saucer, we pull out our camera, and it's on social media in 10 minutes. You just can't stop it anymore. In the past, the government had an ironclad policy of non-disclosure, ironclad, and they would persecute, and in some cases, I believe, even possibly eliminate people, researchers, and reporters who were getting too close to the topic. But today, it's impossible. There's just too many people out there with cameras and that are recording UFOs, and so the only thing they can do today is two things. They can discredit, and they can get in front of disclosure. They can control disclosure, and that is, I believe, what they're doing. And of course, a couple months ago, NASA came out, or I believe it was the Washington Post. No, it wasn't the Washington. I can't remember who did it, but one of these major newspapers released that story, published that story about NASA hiring the theologians. And then all the fact checkers were out there saying, that's not true. NASA didn't hire the theologians. No, NASA didn't hire directly those 24 theologians. Instead, NASA worked with the theological something or other at Princeton to hire the theologians. So NASA was all working not directly with the theologians, but they were working with let's call it the Department of Theology at Princeton. So what's the difference? There's no difference. NASA
it's all a subcontractor.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So NASA, it was very much interested in how specifically Christians were going to react to disclosure. Now, the Pentagon is never going to let NASA get in front of them on disclosure.
No way.
unless they choose to release information through NASA, which they haven't so far. Interesting, they've released it through the Pentagon. Again, framing it in a national security threat, right? Wouldn't you think that if the Pentagon wanted to not frame UFOs as a national security threat, that they would have allowed NASA to start the discussion, to open the discussion? No, it came directly from the Pentagon. So I think that we're seeing, just like in my book, I frame it as the alien threat. I think that's what we're going to see metastasizing as we move into the future. And so the government is not willingly, they're sort of being led along by, by their noses here, because, or by their ear, I should say, being pulled by their ear on this disclosure. They don't want to do it, they have to do it to control the narrative.
Well, even back when that report came out, anybody can read it. It's not very long, but Elizondo was out there too, talking about the way that they were framing it, and it's truly framed in these are unknowns, and it's a national security threat. I mean, they're even that is shaping the paradigm and the reception. Yep.
It is being framed as a national security threat, and because it is a national security threat. And by the way, so we're talking about the grays, the little gray guys, right? Those are I believe that most of the UFOs that we see, it's those guys inside of them.
Okay.
However, I don't believe they're the only faction using that technology, as I say in my book. People need to understand that we should not ascribe good or evil to hardware. In the same way that you would not consider your Ford truck to be good or evil. You can't attribute those characteristics to a machine. It's just hardware. It's neither good or evil. So when we see a saucer, for example, a craft maybe hovering on the horizon, there's no reason to assume immediately that that's evil. There's something evil about that. It's just hardware. It all depends on who's piloting it. And I contend that it's not just the bad guys that pilot these advanced aerospace vehicles. I believe that the good guys are also piloting them. And what I mean by the good guys is there's an angelic faction. I refer to them as a race, the elder race, because they're older than us. There's an angelic faction. They are a civilization. From among this faction, from among this civilization, there is a group of them that defected from the kingdom, rebelled. And so they are insurgents. They are an insurgency. They're enemies of the kingdom of heaven. But they're from the same civilization. They use the same technology. They speak the same language. They look the same. So I contend that this technology that we see, this advanced aerospace technology, is not just technology that's used by the quote unquote bad guys, by the fallen angels, but rather it's a technology ubiquitous to that civilization. In other words, it's being used by the good guys too. And to put that into the most simplistic terms that I can, good and bad angels are driving around in the same trucks.
Yeah.
Just like good and bad humans. Good and bad humans are driving around in the same technology available to all of us. Good and bad angels are using the same technology. And no, biblically speaking, angels do not have wings. Only in a prophetic context, but never when they're encountered on earth in an actual narrative context. In fact, they often show up in the scriptures at the helm of chariots of fire, or the chariots of Israel, or the chariots of God. So,
that was exactly what I was thinking. In that 2 Kings 6 passage, if you get in there, it's very clear in the Hebrew too. If people want to, they can check me out on this. But if you see that context, Elisha is speaking to his servant, and there's 4 groups that are represented. There's Elisha and his servant, which are the good guys. There's the human army over there, the physical, that's threatening them. And then he speaks about, the prepositions are very important. He speaks about the good guys in the spiritual realm or the unseen realm, and then he speaks about the evil guys that are in the unseen realm. There's 4 groups there, and the other ones that he's being allowed to see have these chariots. It's real technology, but he's allowed to see them, and there's 4 groups there. The war is set. So
that's very interesting. I never actually thought about there being the good guys and the bad guys on the scene.
You could
and
check
that
me
would
out.
make sense because it didn't. I forget if this phrase came. And that was in Dothan. That Elisha was in Dothan with his servant, and I believe he said to his servant, "Those who are with us are greater than those who are against us."
Yeah,
and so maybe those who were against them weren't just the chariots and horses of, I forget which civilization, which culture was against them in that context, but maybe he was also referring to the non-human enemies who were gathered there against them as well.
Yeah, if you look it up, it's amazing the way that the prepositions are pointing to who's there, and I was like, hey, there's 4 groups here. This is pretty fascinating. You don't often see that.
That's really cool. I never thought about that. That's really cool. And then of course we know that, Daniel prayed, was fasting and praying, and God dispatched an angel with a message to him.
Yep.
From the kingdom of heaven, wherever that is, right?
Yep.
Dispatched a message, and this messenger was held up by the quote unquote Prince of Persia, right? So what does that tell you? There's a distance that's being traversed, right? God is dispatching a messenger, and that messenger has to travel to Daniel. And that en route, that messenger was inhibited. So there's that, it's communicating. It's not just like poof. It's not like I always tell people, it's not like I Dream of Jeannie, where it just an angel goes, okay, I'll dispatch a message, and blinks their eyes and boom, they're standing next to Daniel. That's not what we have conveyed in the narrative. The narrative clearly conveys a traversing of a distance to get from point A, from the kingdom, to point B, to Daniel, and somewhere in between there was a hindrance.
Yeah.
So that's not magic. That's technology. That's some kind of a vehicle of conveyance that angel was using to get to Daniel, and there was a blockade